Welcome to the podcast Rise and Play. I am Sophie Vaux, your podcast host. I bring together leaders, entrepreneurs, fund makers, investors, and educators who are here to make a change in the industry. For a brighter and healthier future of the games we will make, and how we will make them. We're here to start a conversation because listening and asking the hard questions is sometimes enough to inspire change in us, to take the leap too. Let's begin. Today I am super excited to have Tara with me. Tara Mustapha is an award-winning seasoned game designer and producer. Her experience in gaming is vast, as she's worked with Backbone Entertainment, Microsoft, and EA on titles such as the Skate series, Monster Lab, and Def Jr. Her bewitching work doesn't stop at game design and production, as she and Code Coven have been recognized for their work by the Game Awards, Future Class, Women in Games Global Awards, and MCV Developer Awards. She founded Code Coven in 2019 with the aim of making careers in the game industry achievable and nurturing for marginalised community. She's passionate about amplifying underrepresented voices, and through her educational work with Code Coven, seeks to give them the building blocks to make their magic happen. Tara and I know each other since a few years, and funnily, I was among her first students in Code Coven program. And since then, we've been friends supporting each other in our initiatives. So, hi, Tara. Really pleased to have you. How do you feel today?
I'm good. Hi, Sophie. Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Great. Then let's start right in talking about the things we are passionate about, games. So I was curious actually how you started in games and which games you work on, what were your roles on games?
Yeah, so I started in games a very long time ago. I barely like to admit it, but I actually ended up getting two diplomas, one in Montreal and one in Vancouver in game design, because it was the first time that educational opportunities had arisen to be or were provided for people. Before that, people getting into the games industry had stories of meeting somebody at GameStop and then suddenly being hired and working in a game studio. So it was the first time these accessible routes were open to me, and that was about 20 years ago now. And so from there, I got a job straight out of school, and my first title was as a scripter and a level designer on the Death Junior franchise as part of Backbone Entertainment. And then from there, I think I've worked over 10 titles, 11 titles, games titles over the past 15 years, including being a level designer and in charge of designing the progression system for the Skate 2, Skate 3 franchise, and doing becoming a creative director at Playable, which worked on football and predictable sports games and community-based games, and working at Microsoft on sort of Facebook free-to-play games. So I've had a really sort of vast career touching a lot of different platforms and styles and genres as I worked up the career path in design and production.
Wow, that's impressive. I actually didn't know in so much details actually even your background. So I'm impressed just by listening to it, in the series. So you're among the few women I know as well with such an impressive background in gaming and having also quite deep in design. So as a designer, so that's awesome. Today you are a bit less in games. So I wanted also to understand a bit more the root of what happened when you started Code Coven. When was it? If you could walk us through a bit the journey.
Yeah, so I started Code Coven in 2018, actually, and it feels like ages ago now, but I guess it's not that long ago. And it really stemmed from my path in as being one of very few women that I knew in the games industry, because I've always been involved in diversity initiatives. And for me, when I started Code Coven, it was really about how do I remove barriers and demystify the success of sort of the great men or the great designers and the great game developers that we've at that time were sort of idolizing. And there was this mystification around them of how they just sort of came packaged with great speaking skills and confidence and style, even, as much as you could say that in the games industry. And through the work that I was doing with my own personal business coach and researching things in the School of Life, which is another vocational college based on soft skills, I was like, this is what's lacking from the game development industry, and the awareness that all of these things do funnel into these icons for us. How do we make that more accessible and fair for all of the people who aren't being represented at higher levels within the industry? So I started Code Coven with the goal to fix that, and we've had a really incredible, past 2.5, 3 years, I guess.
That's a great reason to start as well the initiative, and there's so much to do, in the game industry. So making accessible, especially that kind of knowledge, to also have a more varied workforce, different personalities as well, individuals working games. It's great to have started to contribute to it. So thanks for sharing, and even starting Code Coven. I know because I was part of it.
Thank you for being a part of it. Yeah, exactly. I was very lucky to have you as part of the first cohort. So
Yeah. And I'm so happy that it's still like really running big today and having like each season with new students. It's amazing to watch it grow. Then a bit further as well, because I'm intrigued about your choice after all these years, in gaming, where really hands-on game development. I mean, really hands-on with design. What made you go to the educational path instead of, for example, building your own studio, which is also another route that is also very valid?
that's a great question. I never thought I would be in this position, to be honest. I think lies at the core of it is that I do have a very strong passion for design and almost breaking things and then fixing them. And it's also why I'm so great at testing games, because I always find a way to break them. But I went down the path of founding my own studio, or co-founding my own studio, with both Playable and then also with Glow Up Games. And what I realized is that there's so much work to be done in removing the barriers, whether it's as female founders who are trying to find money to be able to start their own game development studios, or people of marginalized race and genders finding those same challenges, or elevating their career paths and breaking that glass ceiling. And then just what the work-life balance is for people who are primary caregivers within their homes as we do get older in this games industry. And I can design. I love designing games. I just love getting in there. I love making things feel good. I love systems, and I love making people feel things and triggering an unknown response, just through the experience. It's just something I truly, truly love. But there are so many amazing stories out there and amazing developers and designers out there who aren't getting the time of day because of the lack of experience or access or growth paths that are supporting them. So I feel like I can always go back to making games in some way, but the stronger, the better position I am in is to be able to enable those voices to be heard, and to kind of break these intrinsic, unconscious, invisible biases and systems that have been designed by society, and reform them for something that is just wholly better, more inclusive, and just a wonderful, kinder place to be. Do you find the same thing with the work that you're doing?
I think I came to the point as well where, yes, I can start another, studio or a company and another game, and it's things that I've done before, but always the limiting factor never changes. I think I have observed that over time and experience, and it leads to a point of frustration. Like, what can I do about it? Can I change things where I am at, or can I be part of a bigger change, which is the ecosystem, the industry, and especially I think you mentioned something with age and experience where, well, not that young, but not that old either, but not that young anymore, where you have all the energy, to pursue a venture than another. And I feel this is a point as well of experience where having a good network, having maybe a different vision helps to create different initiatives that have a bigger impact in the industry, not just at a studio level, but really industry ecosystem level, and using the same energy as you could do in a studio to really have an impact, a big impact that you can actually, have. but what you did with Code Coven, and a lot of students graduated and going on for jobs or even building the company. It's amazing, and the impact is real, so you're not impacting anymore just your team, your studio, of course, with the games you make, but here it's even bigger because you invest in future developers who will impact, other people, audiences with the games they will make. So it's a multiplier effect.
Exactly. It's really exciting seeing all the amazing things that they're creating and things that you don't it's wonderful to, don't you find, like, as a developer, when you're surprised by something and it's something you've never seen before or experienced and a story you've never heard, and it's really wonderful. I love that. Yeah.
I have experienced it quite a lot with my team. So my team also is very diverse. I build it with this in mind, what kind of games could we create if we had very different people? And just like setting up the environment, a good culture, but see what happens. And I'm amazed sometimes of the ideas that can come up and the types of features that are created. I'm just observing, like, this is never something I could have come up alone for sure.
And that's because do you think, for me at Code Coven, it's about creating an environment where people feel safe and secure, that they can experiment, that they can express themselves, that they can be almost sort of less of the politics that I feel like we've gotten used to. And that's the funny thing. Like, I feel like I'm indoctrinated into these systems of politics and trying to have to be in a way something that I'm not necessarily, like, that, oh, she's a bossy woman, or
Mhm.
she's having to play those kind of things. But then if I can remove that for the people who are parts of the teams and the cohort and create just this really authentic, honest, caring, kind environment, that is what generates the ability for people to communicate like that and to share and to, yeah, to collaborate. Do you find that's the same thing with the structure that you've created?
Yeah. And I remember as well, like in the season I was with you, with the students and looking at the project, the pitch decks, and I could relate a lot to that. And you went even further, I would say, for the program you've made. But this feeling of safety and freedom, where really you're safe, and even if you make a mistake, even if you're wrong, even if you do something that maybe was useless, and and we find out, okay, maybe it was a waste of time, there's a feeling of safety. We are here together experimenting, and nothing bad will happen. So it unlocks a lot of creativity and things a bit weird that people will try to do just to play. So it becomes a playful environment, which is the base, by the way, of making games. I think we missed it disappeared a bit over time, where so much focus on business and performance, where we forget about the origin of the games. It needs to be playful. And if we are not in a playful environment where we are safe to play, take risks, break
Hmm.
things, then we miss a bit, like, the purpose of what makes a game and what creates something new. And I was curious then a bit more about the limitations that you can have when your own experience, you were building a studio, pushing for games, what led you to Code Coven. What were the things you actually saw yourself, the limits you faced, and you couldn't really do anything about it?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's a bit selfish, it feels like, of me to be able to create a kind of school based around my own trauma, if you will, or experience, or lack of, and just seeing what people were experiencing around me. And I think it all started with when my first ever job in the games industry, because as a sole designer, I had no other. At the time I was looking very much through the female woman lens of, like, wow, I have no other women to talk to in my field. And I remember kind of being in tears and reaching out to my own department head at my old college, saying, do you know anybody I can talk to? Because I felt like there was a miscommunication in how I was communicating versus how other people were being understood. And I felt like there was this constant need to have to walk into a meeting and say, hi, I'm Tara. I'm actually, and at the time, that they had the sort of stigma or the label of, I'm a hardcore gamer and I have a gamer points that are, this many achievement points, and I deserve to be here. You I am legitimately a gamer, which was just ridiculous. But finding somebody, to talk to, because at the same time, to be passionate about games or design, for me, would often come out in a point of frustration where I would feel like being in tears because I was angry and frustrated, not because I was sad. And, then of course you'd have to fight that
Mhm.
because and not show it because no, you're not allowed to cry in the boardroom. But then again, how are you supposed to communicate and be heard when you're constantly being talked over or somebody else and they don't do it? It's not with maliciousness, it's not somebody intentionally trying to do this. These are systemic behaviors which have just been indoctrinated from a very young age through our ecosystems. So that's sort of the origin story of where it all began. And then to go through, the stigma of being one of the guys and then trying to be in a position of leadership and asserting oneself, but being then bossy or hard to work with or one of those women. And then, as that sort of developed, looking at the double standard in which people could express themselves. And then also just seeing, like, I remember once walking away from a job interview at a company in Vancouver and seeing that everybody I was in a sort of a boardroom and I had four men, white cis male guys sitting across from me, and I don't think they realized it, but they were all wearing light wash denim jeans that were slightly baggy, kind of like that dad jean kind of look, with white t-shirts, and they all had black leather jackets. And I'm just sitting there going, do they have any idea that did they call each other up and say, this is what we're wearing today, guys? But it was that kind of homogenization that I don't think they were aware of. And it became very clear to me that as a mixed race woman on the other side of the table, one of these things doesn't necessarily belong. So it's like, well, why is that happening? How do we fix the systems? And then seeing how I have friends who are primary caregivers at work who can't keep up with the crunch culture. They have to pick up their kids from school at a certain time, feed them, clothe them, bathe them, put them to bed, spend some time with their partners, and then they log back on to work and work until 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they're back up at 6 a.m. to take their kids to school, just to keep up with this culture of we're going to stay late at work, get free food, play some games, but then just work on the side. That's not sustainable. But then again, with Glow Up, the lack of funding being provided to people, or just not necessarily with Glow Up in particular, but just seeing the journey of what it is to fundraise as primarily a female founded team versus the stories that I hear of my white cis male counterparts who are just like, yeah, we just make up the numbers and sell it real well. And then we get money. And here I am looking at the stories of other female founders, and it's the amount of due diligence and validation that they have to go through by comparison, even though they have way more experience and ship titles, is remarkable and entirely unfair. Yeah, so I think, yeah, in a nutshell, those are all the things that we're trying to fix at Code Coven.
I am 100% behind also this mission. Where thanks again also for sharing your experience, because I think it's also for the audience here. It's not, I would say, openly. There are not a lot of forums where we would openly share these events and the reality that we are facing, whether as a caregiver, as you mentioned, which is quite hard to catch up with. You will never be able to be at the same level because you don't have the same maybe responsibility or obligations in your personal life, and also the bias that we are at the end of. And unfortunately, not everyone is conscious about it, and we can just see the result of it and feel frustrated about it. So it's really nice again to have initiatives starting to support and change, more of a system, maybe opening eyes of other ways of making games with different people, where I wait for the day when we will not be called or seen ourselves, even seeing ourselves as minority, but a norm. There are games made by many different people in many different ways, and what we call games is a very broad term these days. And by the way, it's I don't think it's selfish at all as a reason to start actually an initiative that is has a personal origin to you. I think it's quite natural because behind all the efforts, time, energy, and even the pain of the journey, we need a very strong why we are doing this. The same reason why I'm doing, Rise and Play. So I totally understand, and I think it's great because we need this kind of energy and motivation just to lift all of this. Code Coven is a big venture.
Thank you. That's very kind and generous of you. I appreciate it.
And on this time when you're putting on Code Coven, I was wondering, then you also mentioned, you told me before that you decided to focus 100% on Code Coven. Is that right?
Mhm.
How are you paid for this? How do you live, on a venture like this for several years? Do you have any form of funding? I was curious about it as well.
Yeah, so it's been a wild adventure. Not a necessarily easy one. I founded Code Coven basically with my own savings and earnings of, starting out these it's everything that we learn in game development. Start up with a very small focus group, a test, validate that, and then grow and scale and all of that. And I had run the very first pilot programs, just bootstrapping that myself, and then getting a small friends and family raise in the interim. And then what happened with, remarkably, like last year with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement was I, talked to the Code Coven team, and that's primarily at that time it was Francesca, our curriculum director, who and Carla, your alumni, also from your class, coming together and saying, there are so many students out there who are getting their in person internships cancelled due to the pandemic. We're in a position where we've been doing remote training for over a year now with studios giving them experience. We could fill this gap, and we didn't have any money, and we're going to pay them stipends as well. We didn't have any money for this at the beginning of that, and hustled like crazy. Like, bless Carla, she went for it. And we were able, through the generosity of sponsors and studios, raise enough money to be able to pay staff as well as pay stipends for I think it was 14 students for that cohort, for that summer program cohort last year. And then our reputation grew, our brand grew, and the wonderful mentorship that was provided by other studios and sponsors to be able to come in and see the work that we were doing enabled us to give over 30 scholarships, I think, from the last 3 intro to game making courses for BAME and BIPOC individuals to participate into the intro to game making courses, which were funded by all of these wonderful studios. And then, yeah, this year we've been able to curate a program, the International Game Developers Association Foundation, with Grant for the Web to facilitate their diverse game developers fund, prototype fund, which is really, really interesting program all about alternative web monetization. And then, yeah, we've got the other summer program in conjunction with Facebook Gaming coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's through the work of these partners and investment that we've been able to constantly deliver these courses like that. But the whole point is to make sure that we try and keep everything accessible. Like with our game making courses, people can purchase them individually, but all of our classes are limited to 13 students in a class, which means, we could drive up those prices, for example, because of the limited spaces, but that isn't who we're targeting. That's not who this is for. So they have to remain accessible. And then the same thing with the summer program in Elevate. People, especially underrepresented people, do not usually get paid fairly or for the work that they do. They do a lot of free labor. And that isn't something that is part of our values. So we have to make sure that those are, everybody's paid for their time
Mhm.
to create the work that they're doing. So it's very much the kindness of our sponsors, and then our ongoing, getting to that rev model where we are looking at being completely independent and sustainable.
Sounds like a lot of a hustle as well on your end. And one thing I can take away as well, important for you, is really not compromising on your values for monetary gains. And this is rare, but in the end, this is, as I believe as well, a long-term strategy where you don't compromise that things that are even the reason, why you started this. If you start to compromise with it, what's left? So I admire a lot of the hustle that you've done, with Code Coven so far. And that leads to my question as well on, well, how do you manage all the work on this and personal life? Maybe if you have a certain routine you would like to share. How are you doing all of this?
I have dreams of a certain routine. I'm very grateful to the pandemic for making sure that I don't have a personal life. No, you know what? It's hard. You must find it hard as well. Like listen to a lot of audiobooks or podcasts about how all of these impressive people manage their schedules. And what I do realize is taking care of yourself. I need to get better at this, but taking care of yourself means you can take care of everyone else better. And now I have a very clear understanding of why all of these busy and important people get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do their run, to, eat healthily and to take care of their exercise before their day starts, because it's the only time that they have to put themselves first. I think that's the most important thing, is just putting yourself first and trying to get those boundaries in place. But it's really, I haven't mastered the discipline yet. I'm trying to get better at it, but I haven't quite got there yet. How about you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I have to say that COVID has changed my perception of it. I used to, I don't know, when there was like no lockdown, wake up, getting started with a day of work, and then just go by the day, and then the day is over, and then maybe relaxing a bit in the evening, and so on. But with the lockdown, I understood a bit the same way as you did. I need to have a certain space where I fully take care of myself. So I have a certain balance, even sanity of mind. So I do have a routine in the morning to a bit of workout, I don't know, reading philosophy, just doing things that I enjoy, watering my plants, observing a bit my mini garden on the balcony, just things that make me happy to just get started the day in a very zen way. But it took me, it's only since last year that I really created this routine. And now I'm thinking about it. I wonder, how was I doing before? I felt like I was always in the rush, but actually I learned to be in, still doing a lot of things, but doing it slow, which is a discipline that you have to impose to
Mm.
yourself.
I don't know if you found the same thing, but my capacity for multitasking prior to the pandemic felt like it was higher. And like I could still multitask, but I realized that I'm trying to multitask too much. And now I just want to solely focus on one thing
Hmm.
and do it clearly and do it well and not think of anything else and I think that's in a way why I enjoy weight training so much and strength training, is because I can only focus on carrying the weight. If I focus on anything else, it's going to be a disaster. Somebody's going to get hurt. But yeah, I think it's just being still in those moments, right? Being really present is a helpful mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, but sport is really a discipline where you cannot do anything else on the side. You have to be hyper focused. I do a lot of yoga or Pilates, and
Mm.
I have my full attention on the trainer to just follow a movement and not die, while breathing, and etc. So it's a good activity to remind yourself, I'm fine actually just doing one thing. I don't have to be all over the place, and learning exactly to put more focus onto activities. Yeah, interesting year, the pandemic, for the best and the worst.
Exactly. I feel like I almost wasted all of this time when I could have been getting, fit and healthy, and instead I'm like, oh, I wasted that. Whoops. It is what it is.
We are learning each year, each day, and I think for the best part of it, it's reflecting on ourselves and how we want to use our time. And a bit further on the values, because also you mentioned a part of your values that are really important. Sounds like also personal values, but I was wondering, with Code Coven as well, what are these values that really are core to your organization, yourself?
hmm I think it's, for us, it's that, co- we always talk about giving people confidence, compassion, and also that, a safe space. And for us, that, we make everybody, for example, sign a code of conduct. And it's general, like it's nothing too scary. It's just like, just be a decent person.
Yeah.
And it's also trying to remove the power dynamic. So this, everybody who signs our code of conduct are our students, our cohort, but our mentors and everybody who part of our program sign the same thing. So everybody's equal, and they
Mhm.
just have to respect those real rules, treat each other kindly with compassion. And I think one of the big things, in in my life, in my personal values, in the values of Code Coven, is trying to approach everything of like, how do we reduce trauma? How do we make things more easy and kind and caring and reduce, because especially as people who have been marginalized, we're we're experiencing microaggressions over and over again in our day-to-day lives. So what can we do to reduce that? And even if I'm having a bit of a misunderstanding with a colleague or something, I can identify, okay, I'm experiencing this. This is traumatic is a little bit of a big word for that experience, but this is causing me anxiety. Okay, well, why is it causing me anxiety? Because I have expectations. This is blocking me, or I don't have the information I need to be able to go. That makes it really easy to talk to my colleague and go, hey, help me out with this. I know you don't want me to be experiencing this, so can you give me a hand? And maybe you'll learn about what they're experiencing, and to just constantly stay in that state of learning and less about judgment. And yeah, and then equally that to remember that we're all on a period of growth and continually to update ourselves. Too often we can pigeonhole ourselves in a way into who we were painted to be at some point in our careers. Like, it's hard for me to think of myself as a CEO and entrepreneur. I still think of myself as that level game designer 20 years ago, and I was like, oh well, maybe I need to update my LinkedIn. you know and accept that everybody else is going through the same thing. Is really, really human.
Very inclusive values, and I like that you use a code of conduct, which could be also a takeaway for your audience when you are creating a culture. I think it's very mature to use a code of conduct actually to reflect explicitly the values, the behavior which are desired in the environment, and it's an agreement, both ends, that you will respect, this the behavior, mutual respect. And I see as well in companies, we assume this to happen. And when it doesn't happen, nobody can be called out because from the beginning, there was no formal agreement what is expected. So actually, I think it's a good practice,
Mm.
although it could look scary to have a code of conduct to make it clear. We as an organization value a lot of these behaviors, these practices. And if you decide to join us, you have to respect this. So I think it's a very good practice.
Exactly. And I find that especially when it's enforced in a leadership capacity as well, like it has to be, so it's not just to protect the old guard that already exists, and the company. It's there to protect the individual and to make sure that we're just all on the same playing field. And I don't think it's also about canceling somebody either, but it's giving that stake in the ground of saying, maybe you've breached this. This is the part of our code of conduct. Talk me through that. Why did that happen? And then evaluating, well, if,
Mhm.
huge breach, you've got to go. Or, okay, there's a discussion to be had here, and an educational or a learning point to take away.
Mm. And for the people joining, they feel safe because they are protected by the system you've created, which is really important as well. So it's a guarantee, for people who have had experience, maybe traumatic experience, because that is the case sometimes. But by joining this environment, they will be protected and they can trust that things will be, taken care of seriously. And about hard decisions, so related to values, what are your guiding principles when you need to make a hard decision on when you need to part ways, for example, or even when you had to split your road between gaming or educational, like going for Code Coven? So how do you make this process for you?
Yeah, it's about, it all goes back to reducing trauma. For us, it's an anxiety, and why is a hard decision hard? And is it a matter of, well, if we can't financially afford it, is that going to be a problem? Is there a way we can solve that? Looking at those, and I always go back to getting the input of the team to be able to make those decisions, and then looking at what the social impact value is. This what is the cost? And unfortunately, I hate going back to that because that sounds so businessy. What is the cost? And then looking at what the passion of the team or the community or is invested in that. And there are definitely times where we've had to have difficult conversations as part of a team. And for that, it is it's just going back to those human elements of this is where these were the expectations. And what we've learned each time is how do I make those expectations clearer and clearer and clearer? How do we set people up to succeed? I don't want to catch people out or, develop programs that catch people out. It's how do I give them the easiest path to success? And it's a success that isn't just ticking boxes here. It's a success that you can take whatever you've learned, whether you're a team member of Code Coven, a participant in any of our programs, a mentor, or a partner. How do we make this the best, kindest, and enriching experience? And that means that we're always in a state of perpetual learning again. And that's what we learn as even game developers. We design first-time user experiences. We design our narratives in our games so that we teach people things as they become masters of the mechanics that we implement. So we're always cognizant of it. And that's what we, try to instill with what we do at Code Coven and like difficult decisions. Why is this difficult?
Mhm. I will take that away as well from you to, so not just accept, okay, this is a hard decision, but going a bit deeper, understand what is the friction behind. So that's a very good advice as well. Let's touch a bit more on the topic of diversity and inclusion, although we have talked quite a lot about it through all our conversation at the core of what we talked about today. I was curious more for Code Coven. How do you reflect, for example, in the students that you recruit? So if you could share a bit more your process, like where do you find them? Do you have specific channels, ways of channels of communication, and how also do you select them to make sure that it fits your value, the diversity that you try to serve with Code Coven?
Yeah, we try to. There are so many people out there looking for the opportunity. So gratefully, they've been able to find us. But we reach out to other like-minded communities, and of course, the value of what we invest in our students and communities means that it's the ripple effect. So they go on to start their own initiatives and bring other people on board, tell them about the program, tell them how to get involved, to be able to support individually support the people in their studios, but also the change that they want to see. Part of that is what we look for is particularly to support people of marginalized genders. And we also, recognize that there's intersectionality in terms of the stresses of people's lives. And that's, to do with the gender, to do with race, and to do with age. I will throw age in as somebody who's getting older. The limitations that we do have and stigmas associated with that, with the work-life balance that are around. And so, with a lot of the applications that we write or that we post for people to apply to, we try and be, again, as kind as possible and as explicit as possible of what we are looking for. And those are people who are committed, depending on the level of the program. For intro to game making, we're looking for people who are interested in pursuing a career in games, in a hobbyist way, and trying to see if this is a viable career path for them. For the summer program, it is for people who are committed to developing a career in games, maybe don't have the points of access that they normally would because they don't live in big cities that have a game development hubs, or they don't have the opportunities to, and they've participated in many game jams and things like that, and they've shown a dedication to it, but they haven't been given the necessary opportunity to that because they're being judged perhaps on a scale that isn't fair and is systemically implemented in society. And then for Elevate, for example, for our incubator, it's looking at developers who wouldn't necessarily, a lot aligned with like Wings Interactive's values of how do we get money, development, publishing to more diverse studios who are usually being denied, because you can read the reports out there that money isn't there. And for me, like I almost hate the topic, the the word diversity, or the phrase diversity and inclusion, because it feels to me so soft. And people laugh at me in a way because I like, people are like, oh, we just make games, Tara. It's just making games. It's not saving the world. And when you see reports of people being affected by digital poverty, which are systemically impacting those of marginalized genders and race. And you see the pandemic especially hitting people severely, of people who are of marginalized race or underrepresented races, and people who are primary caregivers, typically are people who identify as women, being impacted in their career growth and hit back by 30 years of progression because of something like the pandemic. We as game developers who have seen so much growth during this time have an obligation, I feel, to be able to open those doors up. So yes, we can save lives. We could save lives by opening doors of opportunity for diverse people to make games and have careers and just have that growth. And it's something that I'm so passionate about because it's such a wonderful opportunity to be able to do.
Yeah. And I would say beyond that, not an opportunity, but we're living in a world that is just with very different individuals. I am behind as well the word a bit like obligation, where we cannot ignore it anymore unless we want to keep gaming industry like very close industry. I think there's a strong realization that we have to change our bias, our beliefs, what we've seen before, and if we want to make it a mass market activity that everybody could play games, then it's also made by everybody, and that's not the case today. Not the same opportunities for everyone.
Exactly. And but it's just, don't you find, as an industry, we are so talented at this? We look at whether you're designing for, AAA console or you're designing for a Switch, the form factors are entirely different. Nintendo had the boldness to, decide to make games for everyone. It's very much 0 to 99 and,
Hmm.
um, out in sort of left field in terms of what you can play versus, what you can play on, console to PC and all of that. And we are designed as an industry to move quickly, to be agile, to design to these different form factors. So why aren't we applying these values to how we work? You know?
Oh, it's changing slowly, and we are part of this. And I'm pretty sure for the listeners as well, maybe it will ticker some new thoughts of something they can also change already from today in their environment.
I'm very excited for the future. Maybe that's very optimistic, but no, I think change is happening now.
A bit further about the games as well. I'm curious, since in the program you have welcomed really, I think, really nice people. I love the students I've met, like very funny, and not people I used to work with. So it was really interesting and a rich experience. I'm curious about the games that have marked you the most, the ones that came out of a program that they couldn't have been created in any other way if it wasn't this group.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh, I don't want to play favorites. There's no favorites. There are just so many of them. It's just so remarkable. Yeah. Recently, one of the ones that we do talk about quite a bit is with Mismatched Games as part of the summer program. Four developers came together, having never met each other before, and they made Detours, which is a narrative adventure game that takes two exes on a road trip across America together. And it's a story about a queer relationship. And it's so delightful, and the team are so wonderful. And, that holds a special place in my heart because of their story. And yeah, it's on Steam and Itch, so I recommend everybody goes and plays it. But then I look at the games that the most recent IGM cohort made, and to see so many protagonists and characters that were built, that were created, that are young Black women is like, it brings me to tears. It's just, and for all of them to know, like, we don't, they also noted, we don't see this many Black characters in games, so to create something that represents us and to see so many of them, is really, really beautiful. And they
Mhm.
created games that were about, drinking enough water, or watering your plants, and really wholesome and self-care kind of games. And most recently, in one of our IGMs, one of our participants created a game about fertility as an older woman. older, sorry, I'm doing air quotes here, older woman. You know, but something that people who menstruate have to real or have to deal with is that ticking timer of if you do want to have kids, what does your biological clock determine, and how to navigate that and to see that in a game is really, really powerful. It's similarly like you look at the Prime Minister of New Zealand and for her to put in bereavement leave after a woman has or somebody who menstruates has miscarried. Well, that's the kind of change we need to see, or to talk about and acknowledge, right? So
There are so many other stories to be told, and just the few ones you mentioned, I think sounds great, and just also represent the world we are living in. We are not in this world that is this bubble or a partial picture of what we were told maybe 40 years ago. Even in entertainment and movies, this is changing a lot, and I think we should also take the turn in games as we are, a big medium of entertainment. And to close the conversation we have had today, let's look a bit towards a bright future together. And I have a few hot questions. So the first is, what are the next big steps for Code Coven? How can we help?
How can you help us support us, hire our alumni, come be a part of our mentoring programs, throw money at us, help sponsor some of these programs? We've got the really great summer program coming up with Facebook Gaming, and we're just opening our mentor applications for that. So it's a really great opportunity to get involved and see all the amazing things that the cohort will create. And then hopefully another program coming up at the end of the year, and more IGMs where we're always looking intro to game making courses, where we're looking for inspirational representational speakers to talk about their experiences in the industry. And if you can see it, you can be it. And then, yeah, we're going to be hosting more BAME and BIPOC scholarships and outreach and trying to address issues of digital poverty and accessibility to the next generation of game developers. So, if people would like to get in touch and email me and find ways to support, that would be fantastic. But we've got really exciting programming coming up, and great alumni to hire and be a part of your teams.
I'll share the link in this episode so people who are listen to the episode today can reach out to you and for any kind of collaboration and support. My second question: who is your role model in the industry or not from the industry that inspired you heavily in your journey?
Oh my gosh, there are so many people who didn't know they were doing it either. One of the big ones is Brenda Bailey, who was my CEO at Deep Fried Entertainment, and she also started many years ago a studio called Silicon Sisters with Kristen Forbes in Vancouver, and that was a narrative game studio, particularly for women. And she was way ahead of her time, unfortunately, and I am so inspired by how she was championing for this change 10-15 years ago. And now she's actually a MP out in Vancouver for one of the districts out there, which is just incredible. She's such a badass. She's done so many things, but yeah, she didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say no, she was inspiring me, but she definitely was, and I learned a lot from her. And then, particularly like Josh Nielsen of Eastside Games made me, he just sort of, said things like, why don't you start your own company, Tara? Or something like that. And I didn't realize I could until somebody else said it to me. And he never second guessed why wouldn't I? So it's the little comments like that. I just want everybody to remember that you have the opportunity to inspire and change, help somebody wake up in a way to what they can do just by being little bits of support like that. So
And I'm sure you did today as well with your own journey. For others asking themselves, why not me? You need always, people around to make you question, like, I shouldn't limit myself. I can do this. So it's great.
hey, if I can do this, you can definitely, anybody out there can definitely do this. So I will be everyone's biggest hype woman. I enjoy that.
And my last question: if you had one thing you like to change right now in the industry, what would it be?
Uh, Equity. um, Well, yeah, I would just love to see just more diverse representation again. Fairness, fair pay. Oh gosh, one thing. I'd really like to see more people applying to be systems designers rather than narrative designers. But
Mhm.
we need more designers.
Yes, I can support that. Having seen designers, they are very precious, the system designers as well. Well, thank you, Tara. That was my last question for today, and it was really entertaining, joyful to talk to you today.
Thank you very much for having me, Sophie.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this new episode of Raise and Play podcast. If you enjoyed the content and want to support what we're doing, rate and review the podcast, spread the word about it. If you'd like to contribute to the change too, reach out to me on LinkedIn for a collaboration. You'll find all the rest of the content on riseandplay.io, including my free masterclass on conscious leadership. Until the next time.